Clean from the gully, get the youths that come up from the gully. Don't take talk on the streets, then we study. I count up the cash, tell mum if you not worry. I pray a different part and I chat it in a hurry from the gully. Get the youths that come up from the gully. Don't take talk on the streets.
When I think about the fact that Ronald Reagan was the governor of California, Richard Nixon was the president of the U.S., the whole apparatus of the state was set up against me. They had all of their resources, and the FBI, the police, and they really meant to send me to the death chamber in order to make a point. It really didn't matter who I was, or it was that I was a very convenient figure to make a point that they would suppress any efforts at revolution and liberation.
Mycket få har träffat henne. Hon sitter i denna byggnad, en domstolslokal strax utanför San Francisco, i källarvåningen i ett liten cell där. Detta är första gången en tv-kamera bärs in till henne. Själv verkar hon tyst och blek när hon kommer in.
A year ago, the Black Panthers were much more active. You heard much more about that type of struggle. Is the time of the Black Panthers past?
The Black Panthers still exist, and the Black Panthers are still extremely active in the Oakland community and in communities all over the country. I'm not sure whether you are aware of what is now happening in the Black Panther Party and the kinds of things that members of that party are doing now.
No, but tell me.
First of all, if you're going to talk about a revolutionary situation, you have to have people who are physically able to wage revolution, who are physically able to organize and physically able to do all that is done.
Yeah, but the question is more, how do you get there? Do you get there by confrontation, violence?
Oh, is that the question you were asking?
Yeah.
See, that's another thing. When you talk about a revolution, most people think violence, without realizing that it make any sense at all. Whether I approve of guns. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. Some very, very good friends of mine were killed by bombs that were planted by racists. I remember from the time I was very small, I remember the sounds of bombs exploding across the street, our house shaking. I remember my father having to have guns at his disposal at all times because of the fact that at any moment we might expect to be attacked. The man who was at that time in complete control of the city government, his name was Bull Connor, would often get on the radio and make statements like, niggers have moved into a white neighborhood, we better expect some bloodshed tonight. And sure enough, there would be bloodshed. After the 4 young girls who lived, one of them lived next door to me. I was very good friends with the sister of another one. My sister was very good friends with all 3 of them. My mother taught one of them in her class. My mother, in fact, when the bombing occurred, one of the mothers of one of the young girls called my mother and said, can you take me down to the church to pick up Carol? We heard about the bombing, and I don't have my car. And they went down, and what did they find? They found limbs and heads strewn all over the place. And then after that, in my neighborhood, all of the men organized themselves into an armed patrol. They had to take their guns and patrol our community every night because they did not want that to happen again. I mean, that's why when someone asks me about violence, I just find it incredible. Because what it means is that the person who's asking that question has absolutely no idea what black people have gone through, what black people have experienced in this country since the time the first black person was kidnapped from the shores of Africa. Well, the practice has been the only consistently correct approach to black liberation. See, I don't think that we can talk about black liberation without overturning the system, overturning the root cause for the oppression of black people. The only way we can do that, I feel, is through a socialist revolution. And that's going to involve not only black people, but all oppressed people in this society.
Ms. Davis, it has been said that if the blacks were in this revolution to go communist. The same thing would happen to them, which is now supposed to be happening allegedly to the Jews of Russia, and that they would be treated about the same way. How do you feel about this?
What's happening with the Jews in the Soviet Union?
From what we've heard, the Jews have been greatly oppressed. And
heard from where?
From the media, which we...
And we also hear from the media that black people really are not oppressed, and black people have made incredible advances over the last years. I mean, you have to first of all ask yourself who is reporting this situation. And of course, it's the media, which is controlled by the ruling class in this country. And then you have to ask yourself, what are their motives? And obviously, first and foremost, the monopoly capitalist interests in this country are interested in preventing any kind of progressive political ideas and organizations from emerging which would challenge their power. Now, I mean, take the Soviet Union. There are Jews, some Jews are leaving the Soviet Union to go to Israel because they have been made to believe that the situation in Israel is better for them as Jews. I mean, a lot of Jews, I think, have been deceived by Zionist ideas. When I was in the Soviet Union not very long ago, I saw quite a few letters that were written by Jews who had left the Soviet Union, had gone to Israel, and had seen what capitalism was like, and had seen the oppression and the exploitation that Jews in Israel also experienced, as well as Arabs. And they were writing to ask to come back. Now, you talk about socialism and the present effect of socialism on people of color. You look at the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union has large areas populated primarily by Asians, by people of color. I visited, while I was there, the Central Asian Republic of Uzbekistan. And I was far more impressed by what I saw than I had expected to be. Because there was a situation in Uzbekistan in Central Asia where prior to the socialist revolution in 1917, they were living under the worst kind of feudal oppression and repression imaginable. The women in Uzbekistan, because the traditional religion was the religion of Islam. The women, like in many other Arab countries, other Islamic countries, wore long robes and horsehair veils. They weren't allowed to show their face to any other man except their husband. And if their husband suspected that another man had seen their face, that was reason enough for him to kill her with impunity. I mean, that's the kind of situation which existed there. And now you see women in Uzbekistan participating fully in political, economic, social life, high positions in the party and the government. The chairwoman of the House of Nationalities, which is one of the two bodies of the Supreme Soviet in the Soviet Union, is a Central Asian woman from Uzbekistan. Just a couple of more words about the relationship of socialism to people of color. We were in Cuba, and in Cuba, of course, there are vast numbers of black and brown people. And if you compare the situation before the revolution in 1959, when there was the worst kind of racism promoted, encouraged, perpetrated by U.S. imperialists, to the situation now, there isn't any point of comparison at all. I think that if you ever visited the Soviet Union or Cuba, any other place where there are people of color in socialist countries today, you'd have a totally different perspective on it, a totally different notion of what socialism is all about. But see, they don't want black people to learn about socialism. The imperialists don't, because in the world today, who is growing stronger socialism, the national liberation forces, and anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist movements in capitalist countries. Who's growing weaker? Imperialism is growing weaker. Look at the situation in Vietnam. And they don't want us to relate to this worldwide movement because they feel that we might become a little bit more confident about our ability to win, and we might be a little bit bolder, and we might start doing more things that would challenge the power of the monopolies here. But things are going to change because there are more and more black people, more and more people of color in this country today who are thinking very seriously about socialism, about Marxist-Leninism, and fundamental revolutionary transformation of the whole society.
Could I just shift the focus of discussion for a moment and talk about you? How are you? People are concerned. How do you feel? How are you after this ordeal you went through? You doing okay?
I'm here.
You know that.
I'm healthy, I think.
Good. What are your plans? I imagine the next couple of weeks are going to be pretty tied down. Some talk about going back to your old job. Have you come to any conclusion about what you're going to do?
Well, yeah, I've pretty much decided what I'm going to. There was no question about what I was going to do in general. I was going to be active in the movement for liberation. What we're trying to do now is to build an organization, a national organization, around the demands to free political prisoners, and also in order to launch a more consistent, systematic attack against the prisons in this country. You know, I assume about all of the various committees that developed and emerged around my case when I was in prison. And of course, when the acquittal came, we felt that it was very important to try to keep this structure and keep the people in order to continue to demand the freedom of other political prisoners. So primarily what I'm going to be doing over the next year is working on building this organization. Now this organization should be it's going to be a very broad kind of organization in terms of including people of all various political orientations. And we learned a lot of lessons from the mass movement that developed around my case, and we have to use those lessons in order to build further movements and bring more people into political struggle. One of the most important things that we learned was that when you talk about building a movement around a political prisoner, around political prisoners in general, or something that affects large numbers of people, you have to avoid all forms of sectarianism. You can't say that in order to defend me, for instance, that it was necessary for those who got involved in the movement to also agree with my politics, to also agree with communism. And the reason why it's so important to build those kinds of movements is that repression today does not really discriminate systematically. There are political prisoners who are on all points in the whole spectrum of radical thought and radical political activity. And we feel that it's very important to create a movement which will not emerge as most movements around political prisoners emerge, namely spontaneously in the midst of a crisis situation, which means that you have to start from scratch every time there's a major case involving a political prisoner, building a whole movement up in order to deal with him or her. You have to create a sustained organization that has the ability to take on whatever cases emerge as they emerge without having to do all the groundwork all over again. Because what usually happens is that you have a movement, and then right after, if there's an acquittal, then the movement collapses, right, because there's nothing else to do. And we feel that a movement around political prisoners is extremely important today as a part of an anti-imperialist movement, too, because as I was saying before, the most important thing I feel is to create an anti-imperialist consciousness. That's one of the things that I became much more aware of during the trip. You know, it's sometimes when you're in a situation all the time, you lack overall view, and you become sort of provincial and becoming all caught up in problems and becoming frustrated when you experience a setback. But when you look at it from the point of view of a world struggle, and you know that there are people all over in the socialist countries, our sisters and brothers in Africa are struggling, in Latin America, and when you see our struggles as being intimately intertwined with their struggles. Therefore, if they win a victory, if the Vietnamese win a victory, that's a victory for us. Mm-hmm. And they see us also as carrying out their struggle here within the very heartland of imperialism. And I became aware of the fact that we as black people, as other people of color, as people with progressive ideologies, communists, radicals, have a very special responsibility to people all over the world, because the U.S. government and the monopolies it represents, they are carrying the banner of imperialist exploitation and oppression all over the world.
Can you see a growing awareness among particularly black people here in this country in terms of the need to recognize the international aspects of our own struggle?
Yeah, because there's some very real reasons why that's the case. I mean, take the development now with multinational corporations. And what's happening is that as it becomes more profitable for them to move whole plants to other countries abroad, to Taiwan and to other places where cheap labor can be had, then they just dismantle a whole operation here, leaving primarily blacks unemployed, leaving them in a situation where they have absolutely no economic security. And I think that that's one very real reason why internationalism is important. That's another reason why I think there is a growing consciousness of the international character of our movement. I mean, we were just in Cuba and Chile. And, you hear about Guantanamo Base, but to be there and see that the United States military actually illegitimately occupies a part of Cuban territory. And while we were there, they took us to a point where we could look through some powerful binoculars and actually see what was going on. It was really a strange sensation to be standing in socialism with our feet on socialist territory and seeing U.S. cars and people and planes and all the things that they have just a few hundred yards away. I think that more and more countries that are subject to imperialist attacks are looking towards us as being their major allies because of the strategic position we have
us
right
being,
here.
When you say us,
their allies.
Yeah.
I mean us meaning, well, see, while we were in the socialist countries, we talked about the other United States of America, which includes black people, Chicanos, Puerto Ricans, all people of color, students, workers, and all those whose interests are opposed to the interests of imperialism and the monopolies here.
When you say us, you don't mean U period, S period. You mean U.S., us. You don't.
I mean us,
Yeah.
all of us.
All right, we together.
And we talked about the other United States of America. I was just going to point out that one of the very surprising things that happened on the tour was that the Cubans presented me with their highest state decoration, which is called the Playa Girón Award, the Bay of Pigs. It's an award commemorating the Bay of Pigs invasion. And the significance of that was that they weren't giving it to me as an individual, obviously. They were giving it to all progressive people in this country through me, black people and all of the other progressive forces here. And it was an indication of the important role they see us as playing in the struggle, the global struggle against imperialism. I think we have a very deep responsibility to live up to that.
To go back.
Thunderous, resounding, united voice that we have no intentions of stopping this fight until we have eradicated every single remnant of racism in this country. Until we have ended the war in Vietnam and the neo-colonialism in Africa. We are not going to stop fighting until every political prisoner is free and until all the monstrous dungeons in this country are mere memories of a nightmare. Sisters and brothers, that is what the power of the people is all about.
Send me off, you go and feed. Know me and a rat, but me I go there for the cheese. So that up on my back, and you know them off for eat. So don't test me kill your blood clean. You hear me? Me send me off, you go and feed. Know me and a rat, but me I go there for the cheese. So that up on my back, and you know them off for eat. So don't test me kill your blood clean. From the gully, get the youths that come up from the gully. Don't take talk on the streets, them we study. I count up the cash, tell mom if you not worry. I pray a different part and I chat it in a hurry. From the gully, get the youths that come up from the gully. Don't take talk on the streets, let me study. I count up the cash, tell mom if you not worry. I pray a different part and I chat it in a hurry. It started that first Christmas, ain't really get shit I asked for. My wish list was feeling typed down. So bro, she said they hit